Hi, everybody. It's Tuesday, and so we're talking something game design related. And today we're going to be talking about art style, the realities of art in video games, and the realities of fan reaction connected to the whole Monkey Island thing. Normally, I call these things kerfuffles, but this one actually makes me really sad because Ron Gilbert's an elder statesman in gaming. Monkey Island is one of those franchises that I think has inspired the majority of people who are now making games in some way or another. And just on a human level, to see him get so discouraged because of the nastiness in response to the reveal of the art style. Um, it's very sad. There's no way to feel other than just awful for him because anybody who's tried to make anything knows that on the one hand this is something everyone has to put up with. On the other hand, everyone has a limit. And if somebody's not dishing it out, it's increasingly uncomfortable to suggest that this is just the cost of doing business, that there is just so much negativity out there that if you can't handle it, don't make games. And that's not a moral thing for me. That's just a reality that very creative people, very talented people also tend to be very sensitive people. And the challenge with being, especially games, but any sort of artistic thing, doing for a living, these things start off as some degree of coping mechanism for everyone, right? Games are all those things we escape into because the real world sucks. And some of us want to provide that experience for other people. That's why you make a bright, colorful, silly, funny game instead of a, nihilistic torture porn. You want to take people away from their troubles. And so when you get this big wave of negativity, it feels really awful. And no matter how much you prepare yourself, no matter how tough you want to be, it's discouraging. It feels bad. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't want to hear people's honest responses. And we all go into it knowing that, well, any decision we make, especially in terms of look of something, there's some things that make sense and don't make sense. I mean, you don't want you don't want your straight up comedy, mostly sort of choices and some kind of slapstick cartoony gameplay to look all grimdark, right? It just doesn't match. It's a tonal clash. But in terms of stylized and humorous, there's a lot of subjective stuff, right? And one of the big choices that any developer has to do is whether or not to make a so-called throwback game. And have I done the help support this channel thing? If I haven't, apologize. I have a splitting headache today, so I'm gonna do it again just in case I forgot. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Okay, so I remember to do that now. But a lot of the old like Sierra and LucasArts creators who have come back to games, who are still making games, they feel very, very strongly that they don't want to make a throwback game. They want to show that they're still current. They still have something to offer. They're not just, resting on their laurels. And of course the fans are like, but we really like your laurels. We want more of your laurels. And there's this disconnect about what that means. And I totally understand why a creator would not want to make a throwback game as somebody that's making a retro pixel art JRPG style game, right? I think that perhaps those of us who grew up with them as opposed to who were making them, we have a different relationship with what that means. And that's cool, right? The whole point of being an indie dev is you make the game you want to make and you hope people like it, but you don't have all the, focus grouping, steady salary and all those things that you get with AAA. And of course, the trade-off is AAA makes highly commercial, fairly standardized, very expensive titles that are really impressive for what they do, but they try to be the thing for everyone in some way. Even though everybody knows that's not possible, they try to get as close as they possibly can instead of being this thing that a core group is really, really going to like. And so when you're in indie games and you're making that, this is something a core group is really, really going to like, you have to make some binary decisions. And art is a series of decisions of you have to opt out of certain things and you have your reasons, but every time you make a choice, you lose someone, right? And one of the things that was really great, let me do the not so great. We're greatly appreciative to the people who were early backers of Song of Sparkle Muffin because they have to wait a really long time for the game. That's the downside of having backers as early in the process as we went. The great thing about it, though, is we actually have a community of people that have already put money into the game, who care enough about it that when we are struggling with a decision, we can put it to the community. And we did that with our own art on Song of Sparkle Muffin. We were converting to pure pixel art because the community wanted it. We were humming and hawing and going, this is very stylized. The hybrid pixel painted portrait thing we were originally going for. And more and more we wondered if it was the right way to go. And so we put it in the community and we discovered, and Mary just did some sample pixel portraits. And the community fairly decisively went with the pure pixel art look. Okay, we had the ability to do that, right? And is it completely a throwback? Yes, fine. We're okay with that. That is not the centrality of our creative vision. If an early decision internally is we don't want to make a throwback game, they don't want to make a throwback game, And that doesn't mean it's bad or wrong to want a throwback game, to want a classic Monkey Island game. It's also not wrong for a creator to not want to go back in time 13 years. This stuff's hard. I know, it sounds like complaining. It's not complaining so much as it is just a reality. Games are big, frustrating, complicated, heartbreaking endeavors to make. Everything always feels slower than it should be. Things, you stumble around in the dark and the muck for a really long time before things come together on a lot of things. And if you're not making something that you really want to make, you really believe in, it's just going to be miserable. You need the both the sense you're doing something really cool and yes, somewhat new, because why does anybody want to just copy something? But also, Ron Gilbert stuck a pin in the idea of the joy of sharing. When he shut down the comments on his blog, he said that the joy of sharing has been driven from me. And that joy of sharing is essential for continuing to do this stuff. It's just too miserable without that. You put something out and some people like it, right? You want to share. You don't, because games are meant to be played. It's not like, drawing or writing that you kind of do it for yourself and no one else. I guess some people make games just for them and their friends, but something as big as a video game, no, you want people to play it, right? The joy of sharing is central to the gaming community, to the gaming industry. And that's one of the few things that's really true across the, indie, AA, AAA spectrum, is everybody wants to share what they've made with people. Everybody wants to eventually get that joy of sharing what they made, of getting people to play it, and hoping anybody likes it. And when you get this horrible backlash to things, it's heartbreaking. And I think there's not enough understanding, because even people in the industry do it. I think very long and hard about heavily criticizing something. The Last of Us 2 just fucking broke me, but everybody has things subjectively that they just prefer and they don't prefer. I have a huge regret about not playing Days Gone sooner. I know I'm just one purchase, but maybe if I played it sooner, I could have told more people to play it, and the sales wouldn't have been quite so lackluster at launch. And I really liked what I saw behind closed doors. When I previewed the game, I was at one point stoked for that game, but by the time it came out, I was so fucking burned out on rednecks versus zombies. And I heard some things about it not, it being kind of a fumble at launch, which I think may have been overstated in retrospect, but I was just so done with rednecks versus zombies that I gave it a pass until much later. And, I wish I hadn't, because it's a really good game. Like, yes, it's a rednecks versus zombies game, and I'm still oversaturated on rednecks versus zombies. But it was good, and that's one of those things that, was I wrong to choose to play something else that I wasn't burned out on? No. Did the game suffer because I think I'm not the only one who was burned out on rednecks versus zombies? Yeah, probably. And this is one of these unfortunate things about the industry, and something marketing should be better at overcoming. Unfortunately, often marketing isn't. And when you're an indie game, you're your own marketing. So when there's this big backlash at an art reveal, like at this point in the process, when there's already voice actors and all that stuff, and oh my God, that's gotta be awful. So how do we bridge this gap? How do we recognize that, well, art style isn't something people can be forced to like? And I say this as, I quite like the art style on the Monkey Island trailer. It looks exactly like the 16 Personalities website, but that's okay. I like the art style. I don't mind that it's not pixel art. I understand making a pixel art game, why some people wouldn't want to do pixel art. To me, it's kind of cool because it's bringing back a bit of like the Grim Fandango thing as well as the Monkey Island thing. And I'm good with that. I just think that it's this thorny issue of expectations. And there's no wrong answers in terms of what someone expects. After 13 years, most of the time, yeah, people just want to go back to what they had before, to what they enjoyed, to what they have nostalgia for. But it's the question of, if you have to choose between no new Monkey Island game and the Monkey Island game that the original creator wants to make, again, no right or wrong answers there. Because some people would be, I'd rather just have the originals, let it rest, you know. Remember that grimdark, that dark fantasy 3D King's Quest game, Mask of Eternity? Yeah. You can go wrong updating a franchise, right? But before that, King's Quest went to a more animated style from the early games, and it worked. So there's always a risk. There's always a risk when you go super stylized. I can see why they'd want to go super stylized if they're not doing pixel art, because I don't know what engine they're using, but everything basically but Unreal ends up making kind of cartoony characters anyway, unless you have a lot of money to throw at it. So, the hyper stylized look may have been the best they could make the game look on the budget they had. And budgets and art, it's real, right? Art is so expensive in games just because of the sheer amount you have to produce. And, a game like this is not going to have a huge budget. So they have to make some trade-offs. They have to make some choices. And again, that doesn't mean I'm saying anybody should be forced to like something they don't like. It's just keep this in mind when you fling these vociferous complaints at things. I mean, yes, I say this as somebody who is heavily, heavily critical of The Last of Us 2. One, it was a AAA game with an absolutely gargantuan budget, and they delayed multiple times. Two, no amount of money or lack of money explains putting crosses in a synagogue. I'm sorry, that's just a mistake. And three, it was nihilistic torture porn. And, the first game had an element of nihilism, but there was a heart at the end of it. And there's an example of, would that game or something like Days Gone have worked if it was more cartoony? I don't think so, because of the type of story they were telling. Monkey Island has to be cartoony, and that's why, just personal preference, fine. But the freaking out over, a fairly short trailer really surprised me. But again, and I keep going back to this, we have to find a balance where people are allowed to not like stuff, because you can't, everything needs to have its opposite for it to be a choice, right? In order for liking stuff to actually be good, then we have to give people the opportunity to not like stuff, right? We also have to give creators, especially indie creators, especially relatively small budget indie creators, and I don't know what the budget is on Monkey Island. I'm just based on the way the game came about. I'm suspecting it ain't that big. We have to give them the right to make the game they want to make. That comes with the indie territory. And then we have to take it as a point of personal responsibility that when we don't like something, we have a responsibility to communicate it in a way that is fair, recognizing that, by the time they put out a trailer for something, it's usually too late to make major changes. I think people got a false impression of what's possible based on the whole ugly Sonic debacle. I mean, first of all, that was just legit terrifying. Second of all, obviously that was something where they just had to, sort of push a button and fix stuff. It was 3D animation. It's a little easier to change a lot. But again, that's a major theatrical release movie. That's not a little indie game. So what does losing it do other than sort of release the pressure on the rest of the misery of your life? I'm going to talk about that tomorrow on Wellness Wednesday. I want to focus on the actual game development things here. I personally, I think that people who don't like the art style should give it a chance, just based on my own sort of... Hollow Knight was not the game I expected it to be based on the art style. I ended up loving Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight, initially, I thought this is an art style for something that I'd want on a little purse or I'd watch in a cartoon. I don't necessarily want to play a game based on that. Again, I was burned out on stuff like Ori and the Blind Forest, which was not, you may say there's nothing in common with those games. I know, it's just what part of the brain it hit. I couldn't stand the art in Undertale. But the more I played it, the more the art became part of the experience. And, I was good with it. There are a bunch of other games, like I said, I love Days Gone, despite the whole setting, me being totally burned out on it. If you like the previous games and trust the creator, then it just, to me, makes more sense to give it a chance. To recognize that it may not be totally your thing. But if you loved the previous games, then there's probably going to be a lot that you like in this one. Remember, games are gameplay. They're not like a movie. They're not like a TV show where you sit there watching like a lump on a log and can't affect anything, right? Sometimes in playing, the art style makes more and more and more sense, right? I can think of probably a bunch of other games that I didn't think looked super great at first. And the more I got into it, the more I'm like, all right, I'm seeing why they picked the art style they did. This is increasingly working for me. But if you don't like it, you just don't like it. If it's off-putting, it's just off-putting. Don't buy it. Nobody's forcing you to buy it. All I'm asking people to consider is that these are fairly small teams making these games. The creator has already said, the joy of sharing has been driven from me. He's not doing these aren't real fans. He said early in the year, it's ironic that the people who don't want me to make the game I want to make are some of the hardcore Monkey Island fans. He's not saying you're not real fans. He's acknowledging these are fans. He also said people are just being mean and I'm having to delete personal attack comments. Said it's an amazing game and everyone on the team is very proud of it. Play it or don't play it, but don't ruin it for everyone else. I won't be posting any more about the game. The joy of sharing has been driven from me. That's the quote. And I think people do need to keep in mind that the gaming community is based on sharing. I said this previously, but I'm reiterating to sort of, bringing the point home. Sharing what you like and yes, sharing what you don't like. Passions run both ways. But when you share what you like, it goes far, right? When you share negativity, it also goes far. Why does sharing feel good in a positive way? Because it spreads the good around. Well, sharing negativity spreads the bad around the exact same way. And the only way we can have gaming be a space for everyone who loves games is to make it a place where more sensitive, I don't even know what the word is. Like people who just can't handle being around conflict and being around negativity. And there's a lot of really great people who are terrible with conflict. It scares them. They don't want to be around it. They avoid it, you know, to their loss of other things in the real world. And discussions about gaming should be places they can go along with everyone else. And this doesn't mean you have to pretend to like everything. Absolutely not. It just means if you want space for you, you have to make space for different types of people who don't show up in grief. Somebody starts complaining, somebody starts pulling the, well, that's racist or that's sexist or this, and this. Well, they're starting it, right? With comments like that. That is a criticism. If they're going to come and they're going to come that hard at something, they need to be prepared to take what they dish out. But that means everyone should be very, 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 very careful about what they dish out. Because none of us like it when some sort of apparent out group comes in and starts being just miserable about shit. And that misery is why more people don't share. When some GDC talk that was designed for a very specific audience goes viral and a bunch of people who were not there and don't recognize the context of what was being discussed go fucking ape shit on it, that discourages people who just want to do their jobs and don't want the negativity from coming forward and speaking. And let me tell you, those are some of the most brilliant creative voices in the industry. And we would all benefit from them saying more in public about the process. The number one thing that I hear from devs about what I as a YouTuber could do to make the gaming space better for everyone, they always say more knowledge about, more understanding of what it takes to make games, more a more educated audience. And that's why I do videos like this, even though I get fucking grief. And that's why I combine like gaming stuff, like really hardcore gaming design stuff, with mental health stuff and basically how to talk to people stuff and how to be comfortable in your own skin stuff, because I realized we need both. People have such negative reactions because they're looking for something for gaming that they're all of a sudden not getting. But it may not have been a realistic expectation in the first place. And that doesn't mean that the feelings aren't very real and very valid. It's just, I think we sometimes forget that we're all nerds here. And we've all had bad experiences and we've all probably been bullied. Sort of comes with the territory. And so we look at people, as if they have no problems. Oh, they're so cool. They're making a game. They should be able to take it. Making a game is really stressful. It's hard. That's one of the reasons it's so cool. At least for me. I like doing hard things. They're big, unwieldy, complicated challenges. If a novel or a screenplay is one of those 100-piece puzzle sets with really clear like edges and clear puzzle pieces, then a game is one of those like 4,000-piece puzzles where like some of the edges are like completely straight, or weird shaped pieces or something like that. The level of complexity is amazing and sublime and wonderful, and I wouldn't change it for a bit, but sometimes it gets really, really hard. And when you are getting fire hosed with negativity, the joy of sharing gets driven away. And I think we should all remember that we don't want anybody's joy of sharing to get driven away. No matter how much you hate something, you want to be able to share that, right? So when someone says give it a rest in a certain place, respect that. Because that means you'll be able to share the next time, instead of nobody wanting to be around you, nobody wanting to get that space to share because you don't know when to quit. And, make sure you are giving those positives with the negatives. Make sure the negatives are only as much as is warranted. And for God's sakes, watch the personal attacks. Like, there's just... This is a guy who made Monkey Island. Why is anybody personally attacking him? He's a sweet guy. Like, what the fuck is that? Anyway, I'll leave it there. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.